Let's look at what it's like to be in a position of authority in an organization or community where trust has gone down. If it's just you that people have lost trust in, you'll probably lose your job. People will just turn to others whom they think might do the job better. Or maybe you'll keep the job but lose so much informal authority that people will drag their heels in doing the work you've delegated to them, or actively undermine your efforts to achieve results. So if you've done something to violate people's trust, success in your role will often depend on your ability to figure out how to repair that trust. If their disappointment is in you, then renewing trust often requires leaning into the disappointment rather than shying away. If the distrust is only in you, then you have the great benefit that people may generally be open to trust and be more inclined to give you the benefit of the doubt if you get real and honest with them. You will probably have to speak to the issues and to the lessons you've learned. The point is to reset the unrealistic expectations that you helped set up, to debug the social contract and move to version 2.0. Trust is anchored best when you and your people are facing into a complex and changing reality and understand the need to learn as you go. You'll have to discuss the gains and the losses that people may have to sustain in a change process different from what they and you had expected. Each occasion to reset trust is also an opportunity to prepare people to accept uncertainty and move with greater adaptability on other issues. But the tendency to cover up is exactly the wrong reflex to follow. In public and organizational politics, the best defense is not just a great offense. The best defense is a non-defensive defense. To own your mistakes, name the challenge and the frontier you're all facing, and locate people in the adaptive work that is theirs to do in a larger arc of change. There is an art to disappointing people's expectations. It's important to respect how quickly people can absorb tough messages. For example, in medicine, a patient may expect their good doctor to once again deliver a cure. But it may be that this time around, the doctor may have to mobilize the capacity of the patient and family to face into a tough reality with terrible uncertainty. Some patients can move fast, but others need to move more slowly to absorb such change. Leading patients through these experiences requires adapting to each patient and family and treating each one differently. But think how frustrating it can be to realize that people distrust your authority, not because there are things you have done to violate their trust, but because people have been scarred by past experiences. They may have such an ingrained distrust of authority that they refuse to give you any benefit of the doubt. Sometimes these scars are more specific to the authority relationships within your organization. People may have had such bad experiences with others that they've developed a general distrust of your organization's culture and structure of authority. As part of that culture and structure, your authority might then become a casualty of this organizational distrust. Of course, the challenge of distrust is compounded when it goes beyond one organization and becomes generalized across the authority structures in a society. For example, in the United States during the last 50 years, people have steadily lost trust in public officials, and perhaps even in one another. So studying how to renew trust is essential to the health of organizations and to leading and staying alive in your professional life. While counterdependence may look like independence, it is not. When you are independent, you don't react with knee-jerk responses to authority. You are grounded in yourself and you are free to respond deliberately to people, no matter who comes at you. You can evaluate the current situation to see how it differs from similar situations in the past. With independence, you are open to interdependence with others, with healthy dependencies flowing in both directions. It may be progress to move from dependence to counterdependence as a first step on the longer road to a mindset of independence and interdependence. Counterdependence may be a first step toward developing your own voice. But a counterdependent stance leaves you reactive, not responsive. and therefore not free. It's not a good place to get stuck. The erosion of trust in authority is a serious problem in our social lives. It is so important for us to have the capacity to build healthy authority relationships with each other. Settling into a posture of counterdependence is not good for us as individuals or for our organizations and societies. It's one thing to be cautious and not overly dependent. But just imagine what your life would be like if you couldn't trust anyone to deliver what you expect of them. We need each other. I believe a lifelong policy of trust will certainly hurt you, but a lifelong policy of distrust will hurt you even more. When we become disappointed by the people we've entrusted with extraordinary power, we can swing to the opposite extreme. Instead of having too much trust in authority, we can become cynical and have too little trust. As a reaction to repeated experiences of disappointed dependence, we try to take back control over our lives and engage in a dynamic of counterdependence, where we are at risk of reacting to whomever speaks with an authoritative voice with a reflexive no matter what they say. As we will explore, counterdependence feels like independence, but it is not. These disappointments can occur anytime, beginning in our early years if intimate members of our family or community fail us. Perhaps because many people have been abused by authority, or have had their trust betrayed, or perhaps because they carry the scars of their families and ancestors. They have grown to expect little from people in authority. They hesitate or even refuse to entrust others with power. Their wariness and caution are dominant. Many of us today have become so distrustful of authority that we lose the ability to form authority relationships. We then struggle to function well in the organizational, social, political, and family settings where we need authority relationships to coordinate both routine and innovative collaboration. Authority relationships provide the building blocks that make it possible for us to build incredibly diverse organizations. They enable us to address the complex social coordination problems that we face every day. However, things don't always operate well. In a changing world, authority relationships can lose the flexibility and adaptability they need and become rigid, or be so degraded by distrust and factionalism that social cohesion is lost and chaos ensues. Organizations, communities, and societies then risk dying out. Dysfunctions of authority can develop in multiple ways. In one set of ways, people fall into a state of maladaptive dependence. They have too little faith in themselves or put too much trust in others. As we grow up, we all initially defer by nature and then by habit to elders in authority. But sometimes we never break out of the habit and realize that we are the source of a person's authoritative powers, that we have agency. We become vulnerable to people whose trust we need to renegotiate. We've sometimes learned to accept too little from our authority figures. We may need to find our voice and organize a collective voice with others to change the social contract with those in authority and make more demands, the powers we are willing to confer and the services we expect in return. We may need to discover the radical principle articulated by the French political philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau back in 1762, just before the American and French revolutions. In his theory of the social contract, Rousseau suggested that in authority relationships, even in a monarchy, authority figures are the agents of the citizens. In a kingdom, skilled kings and queens know that their power is contingent on the informal authorization of citizens and a dominant coalition of interested parties. Lose that authorization and you may lose your kingdom and your life. To renegotiate the social contract and claim the informal authorizing power that is ours as citizens of a country or members of an organization, we often need to organize or join a group, an association, a social movement, a labor union, or engage in political action to give strength to our voice. Another kind of maladaptive dependence we can fall into is not because we expect too little of ourselves, But because we expect too much of others and are willing to entrust our authorities with tremendous power over our lives, out of faith that these high expectations will be met. Particularly in desperate times, people will look for magic, and those vying for authority may offer fake promises and easy answers. Our exaggerated expectations create a marketplace for charlatans and make it very tough for even good people in authority to get real with us and be trustworthy. When we become disappointed by the people we've entrusted with extraordinary power, we can swing to the opposite extreme. Instead of having too much trust in authority, we can become cynical and have too little trust. As a reaction to repeated experiences of disappointed dependence, we try to take back control over our lives and engage in a dynamic of counterdependence, where we are at risk of reacting to whomever speaks with an authoritative voice with a reflexive no matter what they say. As we will explore, counterdependence feels like independence, but it is not. These disappointments can occur anytime, beginning in our early years if intimate members of our family or community fail us. Perhaps because many people have been abused by authority, or have had their trust betrayed, or perhaps because they carry the scars of their families and ancestors. They have grown to expect little from people in authority. They hesitate or even refuse to entrust others with power. Their wariness and caution are dominant. Many of us today have become so distrustful of authority that we lose the ability to form authority relationships. We then struggle to function well in the organizational, social, political, and family settings where we need authority relationships to coordinate both routine and innovative collaboration.